All right, guys, it's Robbie. Welcome to the show. You are listening to the Side Quest podcast, the unofficial podcast of Fitocracy. I have a great guest here for you today. We're going to get a little deep, talk some philosophy, talk some video games, talk some weight training, and we're gonna have some fun. But first, housekeeping items. Let's get them out of the way. If you have not left a review on iTunes, please go to iTunes, leave us a review, subscribe there. It helps us move up the charts. We are slowly climbing up the new and noteworthy, but I want to hit the what's hot before Christmas. By the end of the year, really before Christmas, but main goal by the end of the year, I want to be in the what's hot section, but we can only do that if you leave reviews and hit the subscribe button. If you have not started following us on Twitter, check us out at SideQuestFM. You can also use that same handle and find us on Instagram at SideQuestFM. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search SideQuest Podcast. Like us there. Join in on conversations. I put up articles that people post all day, or share some news and exciting things going on in the world. And please check out our website at sidequestpodcast.com. There's a blog. All the episodes are up there. Send us an email. Let me know what you think. But the guest that we have today, he was rated one of the 5 fitness coaches taking the world by storm by Fitocracy earlier in 2014. He has written for the Personal Trainer Development Center and bodybuilding.com. He was nicknamed on that Fitocracy article the Bruce Lee of barbells, which, yeah, that means he's intense.
I love that one, I do.
He is currently living in the Detroit area. He was a philosophy major who then became a trainer, so I like this guy already. His name is Adam Fisher. Adam, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, man.
Tell us a little about yourself and how you go from a philosophy major to a personal trainer and one of the 5 people in the world of fitness according to Fitocracy.
Yeah, so basically, I started off. I'm kind of one of those success stories in that, like a lot of people, like for example, Dick Talon's like lost a bunch of weight, and that's how he kind of got into the fitness industry. I was kind of the opposite in that I gained a lot of weight. I was like that 140-pound like pencil kid in grade school, and I used to do running, and I hated it, and I was super nerdy. Just played a lot of video games all the time, read a lot of books, and essentially, in high school, I started suffering from depression and anxiety issues. I couldn't sleep at night. I was massively underachieving. I coasted through about the first 3 years of high school. And basically, I started seeing a therapist, and basically he recommended that I work out some more, and I knew that I hated running, so I tried lifting, and I was hooked. And so I lifted all through college. In college, I went for like an English and philosophy double major. At the time, I kind of wanted to be a novelist, but then I realized that wasn't going to pan out, or at least it wasn't going to pan out anytime soon. So then, about senior year of college, I decided to get myself a certification. And me being now I'm a little bit of a not a huge overachiever, but I like to be the best at what I do. So I started studying up as much as I could, learning as much as I could about training. And eventually it's actually kind of funny because I actually emailed Dick through Fitocracy like way back when they were first starting the group fitness program, and basically Dick I just sent him an email with a link to my blog, and he read my blog and he was like, oh, holy crap, dude, this is great, like we need to get you something. So that was kind of how I really started getting into things, and that was kind of where my career really began to take off. So,
all right. So you just mentioned that you wanted to be a novelist. So one of my questions was, what is one non-fitness goal you want to accomplish in your life? So I would assume that is something you still want to do in being a novelist. So if that is true, what kind of novel do you want to write, and have you started to write it? And what story does this novel entail?
Yeah, so basically, I've got a few projects in the works. Actually, one of my huge problems is that I'm a guy I like to work, but the problem is that I've got so many irons in the fire all the time that a lot of stuff never really pans out.
Same here. Same here. I've had the ACE book for like 2 months, and I started to do this, and I got really distracted. So now I have to quantify time in each day. Like, no, you're going to read for an hour. No, you're going to email. I do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing too is like I've got like maybe 5 different things I'm working on, and then plus I'm trying to read stuff, and I'm trying to write articles for my blog, and I'm trying to do YouTube videos, and and it all just sort of I never really get a lot done. But I've got a couple different novels. They're basically I'm like a fantasy sci-fi writer actually.
Okay.
Because I'm again hella nerdy, and so basically I've got one that's kind of about it's got kind of more of the philosophy stuff in it. It's kind of a near future thing about a guy who invents like artificial intelligence and sort of like dealing with the fallout of that, just sort of like seeing the effects that has on like the world economy and like and just on like social, like how people relate to each other and stuff.
So does your philosophy background is it more like, are you sort of like, and I do have a question about this, so but is your novel sort of more like Ayn Rand's like Atlas Shrugged, where it's like a story that explains your philosophy? Or does philosophy just kind of like filter in as like the moral of the story?
So it's a funny thing that you asked that, because Ayn Rand is actually one of my favorite authors, and I have to you always have to preface that statement by saying that I don't actually believe her philosophy or anything like that. I think she's a complete nutcase.
She did say once that she would have called objectivism Extentialism. Unfortunately, that name was already taken.
Yes, absolutely. I love that quote because I'm also huge into existentialism. And they're so very different, but
oh God, way different.
But so yeah, no, I really like. I think that she's a person who did a very good job at what she did, even if like it wasn't quite all there. In that like her philosophy was kind of crazy and like it didn't really make a lot of sense. But she's an excellent author. She's got such, like, when it comes to descriptive text, she's so good at writing things, and she's so good at weaving sort of like description into things. When it comes to dialogue, she's awful, because like all of her characters basically just like go on tirades at each other, and like that's awful. But at the same time, I think that I don't know, she's really adorable to me in the sense that I find her like I don't like completely I don't completely sit behind her philosophy and stuff like that, but it's like something that I read and I'm kind of like, this is kind of about what I want to accomplish, with all of its flaws and everything, and that's about what I could hope for,
Okay, so is that where you got the idea? So if people don't know, please, I'll put a link to Adam's website in the show notes, and we'll mention it later where you can find him. Is that where you, like, cause Catgalt, that article, I tried to read, like...
Yeah, that was kind of where that came from. Yeah, and it's actually funny, too, because I have been reading recently a book that I really, really enjoy, and this is about to be really funny because it's a philosophy book that I found. The title of the book is called, get this, #Accelerate. So the title of this philosophy text is literally a hashtag. And it's so funny to me. It's essentially accelerationism is the sort of philosophy that it's about, and that's sort of the principle that like capitalism sucks, but so does Marxism. But so we should essentially like be as capitalist as possible, so that sooner or later one day capitalism will fall apart. And it kind of encompasses why I love Ayn Rand too, because it's like it's so ridiculous and so weird and so bizarre and so wonky. But at the same time, like I have this sort of like like bizarre affection for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll stay on the philosophy track just for a little while longer, and then we'll talk about your blog. So who is your favorite philosopher? Because I am a very big fan of existentialism. I was a theater major in college and did theater in high school, and my teacher there introduced us to the absurdist plays.
Oh yeah, I read a bunch of those.
Right, which I'm a huge Beckett fan. But if you don't understand the philosophy of existentialism and Sartre, and
It
then
doesn't. Yeah,
and
it
Kierkegaard
never
makes no
makes
sense.
Yeah.
So for me, I love existentialism. Though now I've moved as I got married more towards and becoming an adult and trying to figure out what it means to be a man, move more towards like the Stoic philosophy. There's a great book that came out this year called "The Obstacle Is the Way," and it put my mind in the right place that it needed to be right now in my life.
Yeah.
But that's just me. So who is your favorite philosopher?
Oh man, and this is gonna be tough because on one hand I'm huge into the existentialism stuff, and then some of the newer stuff. I mean, I've read a lot of Zizek. I don't really love him too much, but I'd probably have to say is the Book of Chuang-Tzu, which is like I can't even remember how that's spelled, like Chuangtze. It's essentially it's Taoist. Like it's one of the Taoist, like one of the old Taoist books. But that book was such a huge influence on me. I've had a healthy interest in like Eastern philosophy stuff as well. I took a bunch of Buddhist courses and some stuff like that. And the Book of Chuang-Tzu is essentially it's like I think it's for me it's even more powerful than the Tao Te Ching because it's just like so it's just full of like metaphors and like sort of like stories, like parable type stuff, like kind of like Jesus's parables, where it's like them kind of like demonstrating these stories more than just sort of like these like confusing platitudes about things,
Right. Oh, Plato's the cave.
Yeah. So it's a little more I want to say a little more practical.
Okay.
Not that that's really the best word for it, but
right. So you did write an article about Taoism and lifting, and a lot of your work is based, in you have a lot of philosophical ideas within your own work.
Yes.
So explain why Taoism for you works with like fitness or like lifting weights. Like why for you does that click?
Yeah, and I did. You probably read the article that I wrote. That's about like you don't lift the weight lifts you.
Right.
Because essentially, the premise there is that like basically you don't really become good at things without lots of practice, without lots of like changing your habits, without like really dedicating yourself to something. And so in the sense, that's really not like people think of building weights as like, oh, I'm gonna get stronger, I'm gonna get bigger, I'm gonna get better, I'm gonna get faster, whatever. For me, it's kind of the opposite in that I think, like it's, and then that's kind of like the Bruce Lee quote where he says, like, it's not about the daily addition, it's about the daily subtraction. Take away your weakness, take away what's unessential, like leave behind everything else. And that's kind of for me is how Taoism is kind of related, because for me, weightlifting has really given structure to my life. It's a thing where I compared it, in a similar way almost to like, like praying or like worship in, in a religion, in that, you're doing your daily supplications, you're, like you're doing this routine that's sort of like a ritual, which is your, your lifting, which is your periodization and all that, and that's what's giving you the best benefits. Right. It's all about sort of that order and that structure that helps you get outside of yourself and become something better. And that's kind of, to me, like where they cross over. So.
Okay, kind of in that same vein of building habits and being mindful of what you're doing. You also had a great article about ways of staying mindful in the gym. So what are the ways that you stay mindful during a lift? Because I suffer a lot of times because I have the attention span of a cat. Where someone will walk by and I'm like, whoop.
Yeah, no, I'm a cat person too, so I know the feeling. But yeah, well, it helps for me a lot that because I wrote that article about sort of controlling your environment. It's about just sort of like managing to change as many of those little variables as possible so that you're getting the best possible results out of your environment as much as out of your own willpower and all that. And for me, I actually have like a rack in my garage, and that's so clutch for me. Like that's so useful because like I have control over every aspect of my environment. So essentially, like I go in there, I put on like not even like I don't listen to like heavy metal when I lift. That's another thing. It's like like I'm not one of those like pump up like super high intensity people. Like I'm like that guy who like like puts on like some nice calming like piano music or something and just busts out some PRs.
I have a friend who only listens to war music from like films, like like Elk Hunt from Last of the Mohicans, Gladiator. Like that's the only stuff that he does. He doesn't do anything. He's like I have to feel the strings.
Yeah. No, like, and I and that's the other thing is I'm so chill when I lift. Is like I don't get very like I don't get pumped up like people do. I don't shout. I don't yell. I don't grunt. I just kind of I show up and I just lift. And yeah, so like that's been for me like that's a huge part about controlling my variables is because like working out in regular gyms there's so many ways that you can get distracted, and having like my own space where I can put on my own music and I can do like my own stuff is like so key for me because it it really makes me feel comfortable with doing my lifting and just getting my workouts in and all that.
Right. So kind of taking from what you just said, I just had a question kind of pop in my head. This is the unofficial podcast of Fitocracy, and I'm always gonna talk a lot about nutrition and fitness and lifting weights or running if people enjoy that, or whatever. But you talk about the distractions and the ways to kind of get yourself in. So what is in your everyday life that's not in the gym that you kind of have to refocus yourself? Like what really distracts you that just makes it hard? And I know you're doing some other work and you're super busy now.
Yeah.
But how do you refocus yourself when you're not in the gym?
Yeah, well that's tough too is because again I'm kind of that guy who has so many irons in the fire so I get so distracted. Like League of Legends, man. Oh man, I can be like, okay, I'm just going to play one ARAM, or like I'm just going to play a bot game, so I'll just cruise through it, and then I'll be done. And then it's like 4 hours later, and I've played, like 3 like regular matches and like a couple ARAMs and some other stuff. I mean, like that's a huge problem for me sometimes, But the thing is that you have to be, very mindful of that sort of stuff. I'm that person who like, once I really get into the swing of things, I can just keep going for hours. So what I have to do is I also have to do stuff like, go on my computer and lock out my internet so that I can't use Facebook or Twitter or anything. And and then, like once I don't have that, then I'll maybe start writing or something like that, and then like 5 hours will pass, So yeah, it's also about ordering your life in terms of other stuff. Like when it comes to my diet, I have to cook everything the night before. All my meals are prepared a day or two in advance because if I don't cook them in advance, I'm just not gonna get it done. And kind of maintain the active lifestyle I have, I've got to have food all the time. So like like I'm that guy who cooks like 4 or 5 cups of rice at a time, splits that up into some Tupperwares with some some turkey, some veggies, something like that.
So just real quick on that, because I've always been confused by this. Do you prepare, rice, when you boil it in the water, it doesn't change the macronutrient, like when someone says, because I always, like, people are like, oh, a cup of rice. I'm like, do you mean a cup of dry rice that you
No, I mean like a cup of dry, yeah.
Okay.
That's how I refer to it.
I've always been confused by
that. Yeah, no, and rice is so easy. I mean, God, rice is cheap. You can get
10 pounds of it for like $5.50.
Oh well, I can get a 50-pound bag for $15 at my local Sam's Club. Yeah, it's crazy.
Sam's Club.
Yeah, exactly. That's you can tell I'm a shill for Sam's Club now. Is they're probably paying me to say that, but yeah, I mean, I just buy stuff in bulk like that, and that way when I'm ready, I can just pound out like 5 cups of rice or something.
Right. So you mentioned League of Legends, and you've already mentioned that you're a huge video game nerd, and I am too. And I know you heard the episode with Stephanie Lee and me after hearing that. And I grew up playing video games. I still play video games, not as much as I used to. There was a time when there was a lot of video game going on. But I was unemployed. It was 2010. What else was I going to do? But you did write a great article that I enjoyed about how Tetris taught you some aspects of fitness. So explain to me real quick. So what can Tetris teach you about fitness?
Yeah, so that was a really great article too, because Tetris is the very first video game I ever played, first of all. My father had the original Game Boy with 2 games. He had Tetris, and he had like some kind of crappy little Star Trek game that I never figured out. I never really understood how to play it. But I used to play Tetris for hours. I still sometimes, I'll go on a kick for a few months where I'll just play Tetris all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm not great, I'm not like, like world class, like, Tetris player kind of stuff. But I've kind of studied actually like sort of the stuff behind Tetris, a lot of the theory, because there is theory for this stuff, which is scary enough.
Right. If there's one thing that video games taught us as kids, it taught us patterns.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing with Tetris, is that Tetris is actually a game about sustainability. Which is to say that, like, yes, you can build up blocks to save for like get to drop an eye block in a side and get yourself a Tetris. But that's less sustainable than other stuff, because each block has its own sort of level of sustainability. Certain blocks don't fit well with other blocks, and so if you get a lot of them, then they tend to stack up and fill up the screen. Whereas other blocks stack very well with other blocks, like for example the I block and then the O block, which is the square one. Those 2 blocks tend to stack with each other really well. And then like the S's and the Z's, those are the weird ones with the squigglies. Those ones, those ones will ruin your day. So the thing is it's really about recognizing that pattern and sort of finding out ways to fit things together in a sustainable way so that you can prevent them from building up. And if they do build up, then you fail. But it's also another good lesson is that you're going to fail sooner or later.
Right.
There's no winning. You don't succeed at Tetris. But the point is that as you get better at it, you can do more. And of course, no one, like if I told you I'm going to try and deadlift 2 million pounds, you're going to say, well, that's not going to happen. But if I told you, hey, I want to be able to deadlift 10 pounds more next month than last month, then you're going to say, okay, man, go for it. So it's also kind of about learning to recognize those sustainable patterns and also applying those to your real life, which is to say that like if you sort of take that same pattern recognizing sort of feature that you develop in Tetris and then you apply that to other stuff like your diet, your exercise, then you can build a much more sustainable model that takes you further. So. Right.
So sort of like you've built that model with preparing your food a few days ahead of time. So
exactly.
Right. So it's finding those sustainable moments and those ways to build. Cool. Awesome. Maybe Skyrim will teach me one day how to shoot lightning bolts out of my fingers. And
I wish, man. I wish. If there's anything that I love, it's Morrowind, though. Did you ever play Morrowind?
See. Here's the thing, and I grew up a consoler. I didn't get a PC until like '99, and by '99, man, I was way far behind on everything that was on the computer. So I didn't touch a Elder Scroll game until Oblivion, which I know you hated.
I hated Oblivion. It was awful. The thing was, it was trying to fill such big shoes because Morrowind was so good to me.
Yeah, I feel like that's how a lot of people feel about some sequels. I know a lot of people really hated Mass Effect 3, and in a previous thing that I had done, a website that I wrote a great article about how, you may not like the effect that the stories had on you, but think about all the great things that like you got to do in the game and the things you got to experience, but you aren't the one really deciding the end of that game. Writers have to decide it.
Yeah, that's very true.
And you also, and I know we're kind of diverging a little here, but that's I want the podcast to feel natural too. But you actually wrote that about How I Met Your Mother, because I hated the ending, and actually wrote, like, I read it and I'm going, I think makes the ending make sense now.
I loved that ending because, and
have you seen the alternate?
Yeah, I have seen the alternate ending. I didn't actually appreciate it very much, I'll admit, because it was too vanilla for me. For those who haven't read the article, the argument I made essentially was that, well, for those of you who haven't seen the How I Met Your Mother ending, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But it turned a lot of what people were expecting on its head. But if you looked back at the previous, like how many seasons was that? Like 8?
8. Yeah.
If you looked back on the previous 8 seasons, it was totally in character for the characters, I felt.
Right.
And I felt that, it was, they had kind of said, oh yeah, we're going to give you this ending where you're going to meet the mother and it's all going to be, happily ever after. And then, they let sort of the characters dictate a very different ending than, what people expected. And so people were very hurt because they had very much expected something different. But it was something that sort of, for me, perfectly summed up the series.
Right. I think everyone expected the mom to die. I don't think everyone expected what happened at the end to happen. A friend of mine sent me a text like the day before, and he was like, dude, what if we find out that like he's sitting there, he's talking to the kids, and he's like, and that's how I met your mother, and then divorced her and married your Uncle Barney.
I would marry Uncle Barney.
I was like, well, I mean, there's a guy online who used Barney Stinson pickup lines, by the way, on YouTube, and actually got girls' numbers. It's ridiculous.
Oh man, that's excellent. Have you seen? There's like someone who tried using like Tina Belcher quotes from Bob's Burgers with
I have not seen that, but
man, it's excellent. You have to look this up. I think it's a BuzzFeed article. I can't remember exactly, but you must look that up.
All right. So one more video game question here, and then we'll go back. We're going to jump around a little bit. So you weren't a fan of Oblivion, but I won't jump to conclusions and say that is the most overrated video game that you hated. So what is the most overrated video game ever, in your opinion?
Oh, man. That's, honestly, I might not have something off the top of my head. I mean, Halo 4 sucked.
Oh, God, did it ever.
Yeah, that's the biggest one in recent memory that I can remember. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to buy video games a lot recently, so I'm not super up to date on stuff. Like I heard Destiny didn't deliver up to the hype, which I'm kind of sad about because I was looking forward to Destiny. Titanfall, I heard that was pretty bad. I guess I don't know.
I love first-person shooters. Like I got hooked on Call of Duty 4 and then stayed in that for a long time. But I played the demo or the beta for Titanfall, and it didn't blow me away to be like, oh my God, this has never been done before.
Yeah,
Right, so it's a first-person Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
It didn't blow me away.
You know what? Actually, let's go to Assassin's Creed though. I do feel that Assassin's Creed was a huge letdown.
Dude,
the first one, the whole series really, but the first one in particular.
It had a great story. Just the controls were worse. Then honestly, I could have put on 2 kitchen mittens. It had better control than it was awful.
Yeah.
But the story hooked me. The story hooked me, and I liked the concept. But I think my biggest problem right now with video games is, dear God, guys, spend another year developing it. Because I swear to God, if you release Battlefront 3 and you screw up Star Wars for me, EA, listen. You will be voted the worst company to ever exist ever. For the history of the world. Star Wars fans will be angry.
Yeah, for sure. You know what else really pissed me off was Diablo 3, because I knew it was going to be bad, but I bought it anyway because I was such a huge fan of Diablo 2, saying well, I owe it to this series at least.
Right.
And then a bunch of the thing that I guess annoyed me the most was that a bunch of my friends who hadn't really ever played Diablo 2 then got really into Diablo 3. And that was what really grinds my gears, was because I was like, you guys don't even know what you're missing.
Oh man. Yeah. All right, so let's go back a little to some fitness here. So you wrote an article about stretching. Now some, and I've read debates everywhere on this. Some say it's good. Some say just warm up, get under the weight, put a little a light weight up, get the nervous system ready. But my question is, are there stresses you find that help relieve tight muscles or recovery from injuries that you actually do suggest people do?
Yeah, well, and the thing that a lot of people took away from that article was that I was, unilaterally against stretching, which isn't true. The article was essentially about, within the context of your traditional 45-minute or hour-long personal training session is probably a waste of time.
Right.
Which is to say that, it simply isn't a good way to spend, the time that you're spending with your client. It would be much better off spent doing other stuff. And I do highly recommend, the guy's name is Paul Ingram. He just switched over his site. It used to be saveyourself.ca, but now it's painscience.com, so that's a little bit easier to remember, painscience.com.
Okay.
But so if you look up his article on stretching, that's where I got a lot of my sources, is because essentially the article points out that stretching doesn't do a lot of the stuff that we think it does. Yes, it gets us active. Yes, it gets us moving. It doesn't actually warm us up. They did studies where they compared stretching with, traditional warm-ups involving cardio and, traditional, like when it comes to weight training, like starting off with a lighter weight kind of stuff. And it didn't really help. It didn't do anything. Stretching was the one that kind of stuck out as not really doing anything. Now, that's not to say that, that you can't use stretches. Basically, the theory that we have now is that stretching is largely a neurological phenomenon, which means essentially that the reason that we gain flexibility when we stretch ourselves is not because our muscles are actually getting longer, because our muscles are really strong. They're like fucking Superman type stuff. They're like made out of steel. Not really, but you get the idea. They're very strong. Right. And if they can put so much force, if your quad muscle, for example, could provide the force, in conjunction with all the other muscles, of course. But if your quad muscle could provide all this crazy amount of force that you need to squat 300 pounds, why do you think that, for example, doing a little bit of a quad stretch is somehow going to make it longer? Like that's a very small amount of pressure compared to what you get from, say, a squat.
Right.
So what we've discovered is that it's more likely that neurological factors are why we, get more flexible, which is to say that we simply get better at inhibiting pain that we would get, feeling from going into a deep stretch, and as a result, we're able to stretch deeper before feeling any pain.
Okay,
so,
that's.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a very different idea.
Well, I ask for many reasons. Because I know. I usually foam roll. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It before and after, though sometimes not after, because I've been in the gym too long and I have to get home. Mostly because I'm just hungry and I'm like, food. But I have a hip flexor that is tighter and more locked up than Fort Knox. And I went to a chiropractor, and I know I read your article. You're not a huge fan of them.
Yeah.
And but he didn't do any chiropractor stuff. He does active release technique.
Yeah.
Which, dude, it was painful, but it felt awesome. And then he told me to stretch a little, while at work, because I sit at a desk all day. And I found that it's helped, but I haven't been able to squat more than 200 pounds in a month and a half, because it's hurt that much that it's kept me from actually being able to do much. So I guess for me, hip mobility and flexibility is a big thing that I've been trying to push with my friends. Like, hey, if you're working out, make sure you're sitting at a desk all day. Keep that warm and stretched. But what you said is maybe it's more that our bodies get used to neurologically the pain and ignore it, as opposed to it actually lengthening the muscles.
Exactly, yeah. And it's important to understand that a lot of the stuff like chiropractic, maybe even foam rolling, which we don't have studies on this yet, so obviously I can't definitively say anything about foam rolling. But a lot of this stuff is very possibly placebo, which is to say that it's working by convincing us that it's okay to move, and thus like our brain says, okay, well, you don't need to feel pain as much anymore. You don't need to feel as tight anymore. And I'll say, personally, I do a lot of that stuff. I do yoga every day. I do, some sun salutations. I do foam rolling a lot because I have scoliosis of my back, so my spine is a little screwed up. So, I do see.
And you're deadlifting as much as you deadlift? Woo!
Yeah, I know. You should see the pictures of oh man, what is his name? Lamar Gant. Lamar Gant is his name. He's a guy who, I can't remember what weight class he was in, but he set world records in like one of the lower weight classes, like 130, 120, something like that. So little guy.
Yeah.
But he's got like world record deadlifts and stuff like that, and he's got severe scoliosis. Like we're talking way worse than me. If you search like pictures of his back on Google Images, you've got pictures of his spine looking hella ridiculous, like really muscular, but also just like S-shaped, like a very S-shaped.
Wow.
But yeah, so I do a lot of that stuff. I do a lot of foam rolling. I see a chiropractor occasionally. But I understand that we don't really have the research to suggest that this is any kind of miracle treatment. It's more likely that it's it's doing a little bit more than placebo, but not necessarily a ton. And it's sort of the same thing with massage. And this is obviously a lot of people will rail against that. Because like massage therapists obviously don't want me saying that massage is not that great for you, because then that's their whole livelihood. But I think that there's very much a place for it. If you read, oh man, what is that book? Super Training. Super Training, the book that no one has read, but everyone likes to say that they have. If you read Super Training, because I've actually done it, there's a bit where Verkhoshansky goes on to talk about placebo, and he says that there's nothing wrong with placebo, if it works, it works, even if it's just placebo, do it, whatever, just get it done, because it's going to help. And sometimes we need things like foam rolling and, chiropractic and massage to sort of convince our bodies that they're doing okay, even, when, they're pretty much okay on their own. So yeah, I get, a lot of, I get a lot of upper back. I get this one point in my back where it just gets really sore all the time because of my scoliosis. So, I've got this one point on my upper back that I'm always foam rolling, that I'm always messing with, that I'm hitting with a lacrosse ball all the time because, it's just the only way that I can get rid of that pain.
Are way better than a foam roller. Oh my god! Dude, I rolled on one night and I literally felt my muscle just unravel. It was an amazing feeling. So placebo. So there's some mental philosophical stuff there as well. I'd like to touch on, but I want to keep talking about some of the stuff that you've wrote. You've written about bodybuilders and powerlifters and athletes and strongman. So what do you consider yourself?
Oh man, that's changed a lot, because when I said, I probably mentioned before that I started off as a runner. I was a distance runner, which is the exact opposite of what I do now. I was a distance runner and I hated it, and I realized, I just didn't want to keep doing it. And actually, it makes sense too, because since my scoliosis is bad, my hips are all off, and that means that when I run, I look like, I look like an alien or something. I just you should have seen when I did my internship at Westside. Louis had me, try just doing like a sled drag. And he sees me walking, and he's like, man, I don't even know how to fix that, because that's crazy. And I was like, yeah, that's just my spine. But so yeah, I look awful when I run. I don't like running. And so I trained more as a bodybuilder for about 4 or 5 years. And that was my college years. But I wasn't really, I wasn't competing or anything like that. I looked good, but I wasnn't, trying to...
trying to get compete.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Oh, man, I was so dysfunctional in college, too, so I didn't get a lot of ladies, but, so anyway, and then after I graduated college and I got more serious about my diet, more serious about my training, when I started to really know more about what I should be doing, that's when I really got into strength, because I really like strength more than anything else, and that's kind of why I like Bruce Lee so much, is because he always struck me as this guy who was, really tiny, but, so strong, And so basically, I decided that I wanted to get as strong as possible. So I started doing powerlifting, and I kind of did a hybrid powerlifting bodybuilding kind of thing for a while. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get into strongman. It's a little bit harder because it involves a lot of stuff I'm not good at, like overhead pressing. You have to do a lot more overhead pressing. And
dragging Mack trucks with your teeth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Have you seen that old video, by the way? There's an old-time strongman holding onto a plane with his teeth.
Dude, I grew up watching Strongman on ESPN.
Oh my God, yeah.
And there were 2 things I always wanted to do. 1, own a kilt. Done. 2, I wanted to lift that crazy heavy stuff. And I always thought I correlated, oh, those guys are really muscular because they're really big. And always kind of thought my dad was a really strong guy because my dad was like 300 pounds. My dad was a strong guy. So my dad's really impressed that like I can lift as much as I can now, being as small as I am.
Yeah.
So I really want people to read your articles or check you out because your mental capacity and the things that you talk about are more than fitness. And I think that's what makes you stand out.
Yeah, and I have a funny quote where I was talking to Dick one time, and he was like, man, the problem is that you're just slightly too smart for this, like my stuff it doesn't go over people's heads, but it sort of it goes like it hits the hairline more than like the eyes,
Right. You mentioned in one of your articles about always being open, and that it's impossible to have impossible to not have some portion of you that's closed off, because we're always going to be afraid of doing something that we're afraid of. Fear kind of controls us from taking those leaps. So, what time or what were you the most afraid of before you did it?
Oh man, the thing is too, like I mentioned that I had anxiety issues. I used to be a bundle of worries. I was afraid of everything, particularly in social situations. I used to be, I had this odd thing where, and this is funny considering what we're doing right now, but I used to have this thing where I wouldn't call people on the phone. I didn't like to call people because I just had this not like a phobia, but just sort of this weird like reaction where it would freak me out to talk to somebody without being able to see their face. So I just hated using the phone because like I was like, no, like I just can't do that. I can't talk to someone without seeing their face. And there's always, stupid stuff like that, as I just had these little anxieties over like nothing at all. But I have to say that probably the funniest story and probably the most relevant actually, because this is a funny little joke that I have, is when people ask me what the single most motivating or inspiring thing that anyone has ever said to me is, it's that in my senior year, I was prepping a paper for a philosophy conference because part of our senior, classes thing for the philosophy major was that we had to present at this undergrad conference.
Right.
And that was, more than I had ever been, ready to do. And so I made this paper and I put it together and I was kind of proud of it, but the thing was that it was kind of not a crowd pleaser. It was definitely not a crowd pleaser, particularly when I was about to be stuffed into a room full of philosophy guys. So basically I was like talking to my friend about, like how I was so nervous about it and I wasn't ready for it and like I didn't really, I just wasn't prepared. And he said the single dumbest phrase I have ever heard, but it was simultaneously that and the most motivating thing that I've ever heard in my life, which is he said, "Hey man, just treat the paper like it's a weight and just lift it." And that blew my mind because it was a complete mental revolution when you realize like there are things in your life that you don't think of as very hard at all. Like I go into the gym and lifting weights is just like, whatever, some bicep curls, some
it's second nature,
whatever.
Second nature.
Yeah, it's second nature. And then when you think about stuff that's hard for you, it's just that mental block is the only thing that's really standing in the way. And so I realized that it was just like if you can change your mind on those things, if you can like learn to look at something that's new as if it was something that was old or something that you're used to, that all kind of dries up. And I went into that conference and I got some kickback. I got some philosophy professors. I got one guy in particular who asked me a question that I literally could not answer, and I said I literally told him I don't know the answer to your question. I don't know what you're talking about. but I was so much more confident. I went into it so much more prepared. So.
Okay, I mean that can be terrifying. So you have there's an article you talk about in a book, and the guy in the book kind of talks about squatting every day, but really the book is more about like doing things kind of outside the norm. So what do you do to push yourself beyond the norm?
Oh man, I love trying new kinds of things. where it's like I like learned TRX recently because like my new job wants me to do TRX stuff a lot with clients. So I like learned TRX and I had someone teach me TRX, and like my glutes were fried for like days. I did this thing on YouTube a little bit where I was like doing challenge workouts. Yeah. So I came up with these crazy ideas for workouts, and basically I would just do them. So for example, there was one where like Dan John has this article on T Nation that's like 10,000 kettlebell swings in a month, and it's basically just like a little periodized plan for popping out 10,000 kettlebell swings in a month with some other stuff. And I was like, why not do that in one day? So I sat down and I bought myself a kettlebell and I filmed this in my house and I tried to do 10,000 in one day. I got to about 7,000. It took me about 12 hours, and I just passed out because I was just so done after that. And obviously not continuously, but it was like I was like watching Battlestar Galactica and knocking out like 300 at a time, and then and then like pausing for a little bit and then knocking out like another 300, something like that. So.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So doing crazy things to find your own limits.
Yeah, absolutely.
I kind of like doing that myself sometimes, mostly when it comes to like seeing how powerful my own will is. I will put myself in situations like surrounded by cookies after like 6 or 7 beers, and I'm like, you won't eat the cookie. You won't eat the cookie. Yeah. I won't eat the cookie.
Yeah, no, I'm such a sucker for that too. I would probably eat the cookie. Let's be honest. My diet is not the greatest.
So what or who inspires you in writing, whether in fitness or like nerdom?
Oh man, the problem is I've got so many inspirations that it's hard to count, I mean, I gotta say that like I really like David Delanave's work when it comes to fitness. He's kind of a guy that I look up to a little bit, if only because like he's a guy who's about the same size as me, about the same weight class. He does the same kind of stuff, a little bit of powerlifting, a little bit of strongman. Just likes to be strong as hell. Yeah. And so I see him and I'm like, man, like I just want to be you. Like, why can't you? Like, why can't I just suck your energy out and become you? But oh man, like there's so many other things. Like philosophy. Like I said, like I'm really into the existentialist stuff, the Eastern stuff. When it comes to like sci-fi, what have I been reading recently? Like, have you ever heard of the book? It's called Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
No.
Oh,
I'm
man,
the world's worst. I'm the world's worst reader. Reading just my mind needs like it needs active stuff, and like reading puts my mind in like adult fall asleep, and that's like yeah.
I would well basically it's Susanna Clarke is the author. British, and it's probably one of the I have to say that and like Game of Thrones right now are 2 book series that I'm just like so blown away by. Well, Jonathan Strange is just one book, but both of those right now are just so massive for me. They're such a big thing because they're so good.
Yeah, I still got.
That's where I draw a lot of inspiration from.
I still got to finish book 4 of the Game of Thrones series.
Oh man, don't. Just don't. The 4th
I don't want
to
because the 4th is it's just there's like the last 5 chapters have been Cersei, Jamie. I'm like, I don't care anymore. Stop it.
Yeah, well, how like basically like book 4 and have you heard like how book 4 and 5 take place simultaneously?
There's one book and there's a website you can find that will tell you how to read the chapters like in sequential order so that it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, well, basically, like, I like, the 5th book for me had so many more of the characters that I cared about, so the 4th book was just like, okay, get this over with, and the 5th book was like, oh, like, here's all the good stuff happening, so.
Gotcha. So what is your current goal in the gym for yourself, and what is your current goal as a coach?
Oh, man. For myself, I'm a little bit weaker than I was. My peak was I did a powerlifting meet February, and in that I failed the total because I dropped my bench press on my chest, and that sucked. But I managed to get a 535 deadlift, which was at the time a PR. And after that point, I kind of went up a little bit, and then I went way down. I kind of a lot of stuff has happened since, and I've been building up back to that. So if the main goal for this year is to be better, to try and do the same meet again next year and hit better numbers for sure. World records maybe, sometime in the future, but right now that's kind of my short-term goal. And
Okay.
as a coach, man, I've recently started up a new job, actually a couple of new jobs, and I'm really starting to make kind of a comfortable amount of money for the first time in my life, and I really just want to build from there. I may be changing my website. As you know, it's Philosopher Warrior is the website. I've been considering splitting it into two separate websites. So I'd have a site called The Philosopher, and I'd have a site called The Warrior, and then that would give me a little more leeway to sort of split things up and keep things on topic. So The Warrior would be all my all my training and fitness stuff, and then The Philosopher would be sort of all the literary stuff.
Okay.
So the idea, basically, if I could get some money, really pay someone to, make a nice website and get that off the ground, that would be sort of my short-term goals.
Yeah. Well, I know you're using Squarespace, and I use them as well. I personally like their layout, and but that's just me not knowing anything about website design.
Yeah, well, Squarespace is great, and I love it as someone who doesn't really know a lot of website design. It's been really useful for me. But at the same time, I feel that I could be doing a little bit better if I could, pay someone to actually make it pretty. So.
Right. All right. Well, I got a few more here before we wrap up. So we're gonna go back to video games real quick. So a game, there's kind of a three-question here. So a game that made you cry, a game that made you angry, like Rage Hulk-like, and a game that made you laugh uncontrollably.
Oh man, a game that made me laugh uncontrollably would probably be what is it called? It's called Fallen Earth. It's an MMO. It's not very big. It's kind of crappy. It's the reason it made me laugh is because it's so bad. It's fun to play, but it's so bad, like so hilariously bad, in that you sort of you step outside of the starting zone and you see the landscape is just littered with NPC monsters standing around not moving, just standing in place waiting for you to attack them. It's so beautiful. It's so bad that it's beautiful. Games that made me, so what is it, cry and made me angry? Is that
a game that made you cry, and then a game that made you so angry, like you hulked out and almost threw a controller, or you broke a controller, or...
I have never broken a controller, actually, so that's something to put on my bucket list, but I am more of a PC gamer. I have to say that not even Dark Souls has ever made me angry the way World of Warcraft has. World of Warcraft was I played World of Warcraft all through college, actually, and yeah. I had a very dedicated guild that I got into, mostly by luck, and we were top 10 in our server for a while, but I loved that game so much, but it also, there'd be a raid wipe against something, and we would just all melt in anger, we would all we'd all begin just exploding and then just yelling at each other, and in a good way, just the why the fuck would you do this? How could you not do that? Why did you stand in the fire? Don't stand in the fire. It's so much of that in the end, even though it's so great. But a game that made me cry, man, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Although I have played some really great games. Have you ever played Super Brothers? Sword and Sorcery?
I played it on my iPad, but I got really lost trying to figure out something and just kind of gave up.
Yeah. I really love that game. That was that game was I definitely didn't make me cry. I'll say that. But it was such a beautifully done game in that it was bizarre and weird, and yet it came together so well for me. I played it through and I was so excited and so just so touched by it, I guess, at the time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
it was very emotionally moving, even if it wasn't a crying sort of thing.
Right, and I felt that way with Journey.
I haven't played Journey yet. I haven't gotten to it. That's on my list of things to do.
It is. You'll finish it in 2 hours. If you got 2 hours one night, play it. it's the thing about like, and I think you as a philosopher will enjoy it because it's not it's not a game, like it's not a game. It's more like an experience, and it kind of teaches you. It's like a life lesson almost in a way that like, yeah, there's this mountain and there's this thing that you get to, and then like you die, but you have all these great experiences and these like goals and these things to accomplish, and it's wonderful. It really, really was really wonderful. All right, so what? I know you said you don't listen to like rock and roll when you're working out, but do you have a guilty pleasure on your workout mix? And if it's not on your workout mix, what is your guilty pleasure song that you don't like to admit to people that you listen to?
Oh man, you know, I'm legitimately gonna have to go into my Spotify right now and look at my list of favorites, but I absolutely have a few, I can tell you, just not off the top of my head. Let me look.
Okay.
Oh man, scrolling through some of this stuff. You know what? I don't actually have anything recently. Oh, you know what I do have is I have The Bad Touch by Bloodhound Gang.
Dude, that's not a guilty pleasure. Bloodhound Gang is awesome.
I can tell you that I know that song literally by heart. I could start singing it right now. I'm not going to. I swear I will not. But but I absolutely could. I know the lyrics almost by heart.
Okay.
You know, one of those things where it comes on and I'm like, oh my god, yes, let's do this, and I just.
When you go to karaoke, it's the song you do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
All right, so this one's a fun one, and for all the geeks that are listening, I think you will enjoy it. This is a question that I took from something someone once asked in college. So Gandalf, Mr. Miyagi, and Yoda are all in a room. What are they discussing or solving?
Oh man, I mean, it would have to be something big. Like it would absolutely have to be like one of the ultimate questions of life sort of things, you know. Man, and you know what else? Someone has pointed out to me. My girlfriend actually, she pointed out that if going back to Buffy, because I know that you're a fan of Buffy as well.
Love Buffy.
have you realized that Buffy is literally just Harry Potter with a gender swapped main character? So you've got the chosen one, you've got the smart female sidekick, you've got the sort of doofy male sidekick, and then you've got like the wise older teacher to guide them.
But I mean, it is in a way, it is, but aren't so many of like, I feel like that's
such an archetype, yeah.
Like, such an archetype that I mean, even Star Wars in its own respect is you've got the old teacher with Obi-Wan, you've got the chosen one in Luke, you've got, I mean, C-3PO and R2-D2 to me are really sort of like they're the comic relief that he sort of stole from like Commedia dell'arte, except in different ways. I can see that, except Harry Potter, but that's just me.
Yeah.
All right, so the last question, and I want to touch on this. I want to go back to your training and your philosophy as a trainer. Yeah. On your blog, you mentioned that you came up with the Uplift Method. So for anyone who's interested in you and might want to reach out to you and get you as a coach online, can you explain to them what the Uplift Method is?
Yeah, so the Uplift Method is my first ebook, and it's essentially there's sort of a glossary in it for terms for like sort of people to pick up and like learn lifting, like just to kind of get a really basic understanding of what lifting is and how they should train. But it's also got a large, basically a collection of essays that I've written about fitness, about the fitness industry, about sort of my journey in the fitness industry, and also I wrote an article about kind of why I think that mindfulness is really important as sort of a concept, but that mind-body exercise is mostly an abuse of that term. It's sort of just sort of a sales tactic. But essentially, it's above everything else. It's about tailoring plans to work for you. And that means that you have to enjoy your workout all the time, no matter what no matter what. That has to be the single driving force behind your workout. So, like if, for example, like again, like going back to my personal story, like I hated running and I found that out, and then I I began doing bodybuilding stuff because I realized that I like lifting, but then I realized that strength was kind of really more the stuff I cared about more than looking good. So that was when I, really started getting into powerlifting and strongman, and that's where I've kind of found my niche. And I even now, I've realized that I suck at squatting, so I'm probably just going to be, my deadlift is probably going to be like the single lift that I focus on the most in my training. And so it's really about finding that niche. It's about finding stuff that works for you, and it's about just sort of varying up your workouts to really take advantage of that, to really to express yourself and the way you like to do things. More than just kind of following some kind of stupid program and just just kind of doing what other people tell you to do. I'm a huge fan of personalized workouts, and I think that a huge problem in the fitness industry is that we give out these sort of one-size-fits-all protocols, which really don't. And so like you got all these guys that are like, what did Arnold do for his workouts? And it's like, well, the way Arnold Schwarzenegger trained is not the way you should train. Everyone's different. Everyone's body reacts a little bit differently. Everyone has to train a little bit differently. And just trying to copy the way experts have done it is absolutely not the way to go, because you're just gonna, not even experts really have super set training schedules. A lot of experts tend to be, they switch off between different programs as they find out what works for them. And so, it's ultimately about that. It's about embracing, trying new things. It's about embracing, trying new things to find, what your niche is and sticking with that. So. Okay,
I like that. I think that's a great way to train someone is giving them something that they actually enjoy.
Yeah.
I know so many people don't like weights, and I personally hate running. I'll sprint because I know I'll be done in like 10 or 12 minutes. But I'm not a fan of long distance running. But I guess my goal to do a Spartan race, I'm going to have to at least run like a 5K. So
yeah, well, I actually did a Warrior Dash a while back without having done any cardio prep.
Really?
So essentially, I was just, that was actually back when I was bodybuilding, so I was just lifting all the time, and my parents were like, oh, you want to go to this Warrior Dash that we're doing? And I was like, oh, sure. So I went into it having zero cardio prep, none whatsoever, and it was awful. I barely made it to the finish line, but at least the muscular challenges, like the obstacles, weren't so bad, because that was kind of the stuff that I was a little bit better at. But it was a blast, and I had fun. It's just it was also not something that I would really do, every day, for example.
of course. So if people want to find you, Adam, where can they find you on the interwebs, on Fitocracy, or out in social media?
Oh, all over. I've got a YouTube. I honestly can't remember the name of my YouTube channel right now. I've got my website, www.philosopher-warrior.com. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Facebook. The thing is, I do have my little online handle, and you were talking to me about this earlier. How do we pronounce that? It's Thegn. It's Thane is how that's pronounced. It's like the Old English. It comes from my love of Beowulf. So that's kind of a stupid in joke, but it's Thane Tweets is my Twitter account, and I think if I remember correctly, my Facebook my professional Facebook page is like Thane Philosopher Warrior or something like that. But yeah, I'm all over the place. If you search Adam Fisher, if you search my name, you should be able to find me. So.
All right. Well, I had a great time, Adam. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Congrats again on being mentioned this year as one of the top 5 people taking the fitness industry by storm from Fitocracy. That's a huge honor. You've had a Fitocracy class. Are you possibly going to have anything that you might offer to people coming up for the new year, or are you kind of focusing on your one-on-ones in your local?
Yeah, well, I'm actually I am looking to do another class soon. I've done a couple classes that have been strength-oriented, but I'm looking to do kind of more of a weight loss-oriented one that combines kind of weight loss stuff with my love for deadlifts. So it'd be just deadlifts and weight loss, which I think could be, I think that could go over pretty well. But we'll see. That's kind of in the works. We'll see when I finally pull that one out. So.
All right. Well, again, thank you for coming on the show. I had a great time talking video games and all things nerd and philosophy. And it's It's going to be a long episode, so guys, I hope you enjoyed. There's a lot of great info here. Please go check out Adam's website. It's not just about fitness. He has a lot of stuff on his own philosophy in life and tying in things that go on in the world. So it's not just some bro talking about doing barbell curls in the squat rack. But it's been a good time. Adam, again, thank you for coming on, and everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, it's been great to be here. Have a good one.